me. I am the property manager for Oak Haven Estates, a small, exclusive community of 32 homes. My job title is Community Operations Coordinator, which basically means I am the human shield between the residents and the ancient, sometimes contradictory bylaws that govern this beautiful, historic neighborhood. Our properties are defined by carefully laid, dry-stacked stone walls and ancient oaks, some predating the Civil War. It's a good gig. Quiet, mostly. Be not me, Agnes Periwinkle. She is the HOA Board President, retired from some unspecified executive role that she mentions at least twice per conversation. Agnes has more free time than she knows what to do with, and an ego the size of a small private jet. She's tiny, with a perfectly coiffed silver bob and a permanent expression of barely suppressed indignation. Agnes sees Oak Haven not as a community, but as her personal dollhouse. Every shrub, every shade of exterior paint, every mailbox post must conform to her vision of historical accuracy, a vision that changes with her mood. My office is a small, renovated carriage house near the main entrance, tucked behind an imposing iron gate. Agnes considers it her secondary command center. She would often sweep in unannounced, clutching a small, leather-bound notebook filled with what she called observations. These were less observations and more divine pronouncements. One Tuesday morning, around 8:15, Agnes burst through my door, her usually placid face contorted. "The Petersons' rose bush," she exclaimed, without preamble. "It's unruly, positively scandalous. It's sprawling onto the common sidewalk area by at least 6 inches. I looked up from my desk. The Petersons had a truly magnificent climbing rose, a heritage variety that cascaded over their front wall. It was the envy of the entire community. "Agnes," I began, Article 5, Section 3 states that plantings may not obstruct pedestrian traffic. 6 inches of rose, particularly a pliable climbing variety, isn't an obstruction. She scoffed. It could become an obstruction, and it looks untamed. This is Oak Haven, not some common garden district. Send them a notice. Require immediate pruning back to the property line. Or I will. Her eyes narrowed. I can have a landscaper trim it and bill them, you know. Article 5, Section 6. I knew. It was a bylaw about neglected properties, not a single rose tendril. A few weeks later, Agnes was back, agitated about the new family on Elm Street, the Millers. They had moved in from out of state, and in a fit of genuine, if naive, enthusiasm, painted their front door a vibrant, cheerful robin's egg blue. It was a lovely color, perfectly complementing the gray stone facade of their home. "Unacceptable," Agnes declared, pointing a slender finger at a photo she had printed. "It's not in the approved palette. It clashes with the character of Oak Haven." Article 2, Section 4 clearly states exterior colors must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee. She paused, triumphant, which I chair. I sighed internally. Agnes, the Millers submitted their color swatch. The committee, including yourself, approved Sky Mist, which is a very close match to this. I pulled up the digitized records, displaying the approved swatch. The hue shift might be due to sunlight or their camera settings. It looks perfectly fine. Nonsense, she shrieked, rapping her knuckles on my monitor. It's too bright, too modern. They must repaint it immediately to a more subdued shade. Perhaps a slate gray. Issue the violation notice. I tried to explain that Sky Mist was objectively approved, but she simply waved her hand, dismissing my words as if they were pesky gnats. The Millers had to repaint their door, which was already the approved color, to a darker, duller shade, just to placate Agnes. Then came the incident with the Fosters' lamppost. The Fosters had lived in Oakhaven for 40 years. Their quaint, wrought iron lamppost, a family heirloom, stood proudly near their driveway entrance. It was a classic piece, perfectly in keeping with the historical aesthetic. Agnes, however, decided it was too ornate. It's ostentatious, she decreed during a board meeting, eyeing me pointedly, and it's not standardized. All lampposts in Oakhaven are meant to be uniform. That one stands out like a sore thumb. A gaudy sore thumb. Article 6, Section 2, Subsection D, Exterior Fixtures. I calmly read from the bylaws. Article 6, Section 2, Subsection specifies standardized street lighting fixtures maintained by the HOA in common areas. The Fosters' lamppost is on their private property, not a common area street light. It predates this bylaw by decades, making it grandfathered in. Agnes's face turned a shade of puce. Grandfathered or not, it affects curb appeal. We need to enforce a consistent aesthetic. This is a matter of property values. The Fosters, gentle elderly people, were so distraught by Agnes's constant badgering, they eventually removed their beloved lamppost and replaced it with a generic HOA-approved fixture. I took extra care to document every email, every phone call, every one-sided instruction Agnes issued regarding these matters. It was becoming a habit, a very important habit. The breaking point arrived with my own mailbox. My property, like all others in Oakhaven, had a short stone wall defining the front boundary, topped with a rustic wooden mailbox post. This post had been there for as long as anyone could remember, perfectly aligned with the deeded property line. It was, in fact, listed on the original blueprints for the carriage house I now inhabited. One blustery Thursday, Agnes marched onto my property, tape measure in hand, followed by a bewildered landscaper. "Your mailbox post," she declared, pointing a trembling finger. "It's 3 feet too far forward. It encroaches on the common pedestrian easement." Article 7, Section 2, Subsection C, Encroachments on common property. I stared at her. "Agnes, this mailbox has been here since before Oakhaven was formally incorporated. It's on my deeded property. The easement is behind it. I pulled out my property survey from my briefcase, unfolding the aged parchment. See, this line here, that's the boundary. My post is clearly inside it. She waved her hand dismissively. That survey is clearly outdated. I've had a look at the original plans for the entire Oakhaven development, the true master plans, and my own measurements confirm it. This area you're occupying, this 3-foot strip, is common property. It's meant for the Oakhaven welcome sign. I've decided we need a grander entrance feature. Something stately, and your mailbox is squarely in the way. My mind raced. A common pedestrian easement. A true master plan only she had seen. And a new Oakhaven welcome sign right on my property line. This was new. This was different. This was Agnes not just overreaching on other people's property, but directly on mine for her own pet project. And she was using a phantom easement as justification. Agnes, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Any change to the common areas requires a full board vote, a city permit for construction, and often a new survey if it affects property lines or public easements. This is a historic district. We have specific codes. Nonsense, she interrupted, her voice rising. This is my decision. As president, I have executive authority for beautification projects under Article 5, Section 4. Your mailbox is an impediment. Move it, or I will have it removed and bill you. The new Oakhaven welcome sign will be erected next week. She then turned to the landscaper, a young man named Gary, who looked perpetually terrified, and instructed him to mark out the new location for my mailbox, exactly 3 feet back from its current position. Make sure it's precisely 3 feet, Gary. Don't want any more encroachments. I watched Gary, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple, carefully measure and spray paint a new line, precisely 3 feet onto my property. It was clear Agnes intended to build her Oakhaven welcome sign right where my mailbox used to be. Now a 3-foot strip of newly liberated land. My mailbox post had been there for 80 years. It was part of the history of this property. A cold calm settled over me. I nodded slowly. Understood, Agnes. I will comply. I will move my mailbox post 3 feet back to the location you've designated by the end of the week. My tone was flat, devoid of emotion. I could see a flicker of surprise in her eyes, probably expecting a fight. But she quickly replaced it with a smug smirk. Excellent, she purred. Finally, some cooperation. You see, it's for the good of the community, for Oakhaven. She turned and strode off, Gary scrambling to follow, her silver bob bobbing triumphantly. The very next day, I meticulously documented every aspect of Agnes's demands. I pulled my official property deed, cross-referencing it with the city's plat map, which clearly showed no such common pedestrian easement where Agnes claimed. That 3-foot strip was unequivocally part of my private property. I took dozens of photos, time-stamped images of my original mailbox location, Gary's spray-painted line, and the empty space where Agnes intended her new sign to stand. I reviewed the HOA bylaws, specifically Article 5, Section 4, which Agnes had cited for executive authority for beautification projects. It explicitly stated any beautification project impacting common areas or requiring structural changes exceeding $500 in cost or affecting property boundaries requires a majority vote of the full HOA board and adherence to all local zoning and permitting regulations. Her executive authority was severely limited and certainly didn't include unilaterally claiming private property. Then I delved into the city's historic district, architectural guidelines, and zoning ordinances. Oak Haven Estates was designated a Level 2 historic overlay district. This meant any exterior alteration, new construction, or demolition of even minor structures, especially those facing a public thoroughfare or adjacent to a public right-of-way, required a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic Preservation Commission and a full building permit from the city's Department of Planning and Development. This process involved detailed architectural drawings, material specifications, and often a public hearing. I moved my mailbox post exactly 3 feet back to the location Agnes had indicated. I took more photos, documenting the precise new position. I made sure to leave the area where my old mailbox stood visibly empty, a perfect rectangular patch of freshly disturbed earth, waiting for Agnes's grand project. My malicious compliance was now complete on my end. I had followed her instructions to the letter, establishing a clear chain of command and responsibility. Then I waited. Agnes, true to her word, quickly mobilized. She hired a crew, not the usual Oak Haven landscapers, but an unknown outfit she'd found. Within days, they began construction on what she proudly called the Oak Haven Welcome Archway, a grand, faux stone structure with an elaborate, backlit sign, complete with faux gas lanterns. It was garish and completely out of character for the subtly elegant neighborhood. And it was exactly 3 feet onto my property, right where my old mailbox had stood, and critically, extended a further 2 feet beyond that, into what was unequivocally a city-maintained public right-of-way. It completely obscured the view of a crucial traffic mirror at an intersection. I watched, I documented, I photographed. Every shovel of dirt, every stone laid, every moment of construction, with exact time and date stamps. I ensured the perspective of my photos clearly showed the new structure's encroachment onto my land, and more importantly, its intrusion into the city's right-of-way, directly in front of the traffic mirror. My camera, an old DSLR, was set to embed GPS coordinates and time into every image file. No one could dispute my evidence. I made sure to send an email to the entire HOA board and Agnes, notifying them that construction has commenced on the new Oakhaven Welcome Archway at the community entrance, as per President Periwinkle's directive. This email served as a time-stamped notification that the board should have been aware, and a final, subtle layer of documentation on Agnes's sole authority. The inevitable happened less than 2 weeks later. I was in my office when my phone rang. It was Brenda from City Planning. "Mr. Protagonist's last name," she said, her voice strained. "We've received multiple complaints, and our inspectors have confirmed a major unpermitted construction at the entrance to Oakhaven Estates, a large archway blocking a traffic mirror, encroaching on public land. We've issued a stop work order and a hefty fine. We're also contacting the Historic Preservation Commission. This is a serious violation." "I'm aware, Brenda," I replied calmly. I documented the entire process. I was under the direct instruction of the HOA President, Agnes Periwinkle, regarding the placement of that structure. I have all the communications and photographic evidence. The sound of Brenda exhaling slowly was audible. "Good. Because this looks like a demolition order waiting to happen, and the fines are already in the tens of thousands. We need to know who authorized this. Someone is going to be held personally liable for this, in addition to the HOA itself." Less than an hour later, Agnes, a furious red splotch on her neck, burst into my office. "This is an outrage," she shrieked, slamming a bright orange stop work order onto my desk. "The city has completely overreacted, and it's all your fault. You allowed them to build it incorrectly. You, as the community operations coordinator, should have ensured proper placement. You misled me about the property lines." I stood up slowly, meeting her gaze. "Agnes," I said, my voice low and steady, "I moved my mailbox exactly 3 feet back, precisely where you instructed me to. I documented that." I pulled out a carefully organized binder. "I also have documentation of your repeated insistence that the area where you built your archway was common property, and that you had executive authority for this beautification project." I flipped open the binder. "Here, email from you, dated April 12th, stating my measurements confirm the 3-foot encroachment. Here, a time-stamped photo of Gary spray painting the new location for my mailbox, 3 feet onto my deeded land. Here, the minutes from the March board meeting where I explicitly informed you that such a project required a full board vote, city permits, and a new survey, especially in a historic district." Agnes's eyes darted around, her bravado faltering. That's circumstantial. You should have stopped them. You're the manager." And here I continued, undeterred, pulling out a printout of the full HOA bylaws, highlighted sections glowing yellow, is Article 5, Section 4, which states beautification projects exceeding $500 or affecting property boundaries require a board vote and adherence to city regulations. Your archway cost over $20,000, Agnes, and it is 5 feet onto my property and the city's public right-of-way, completely blocking a traffic mirror. I pointed to the printouts of my time-stamped photographs of the construction. You bypassed the board. You bypassed city permits. You bypassed me. You acted unilaterally, Agnes. Every single step of the way. I simply complied with your direct orders for my property. The color drained from her face. She looked like a deflated balloon. The trap was sprung. The air in the room was thick with the weight of her impending doom. The fallout was spectacular. The city of Oak Haven filed an immediate lawsuit against the HOA for egregious violations of zoning, historic preservation, and public safety ordinances. The fines escalated to 6 figures almost instantly. A demolition order was issued for the Oak Haven Welcome Archway. The cost of demolition, remediation, and legal fees was crippling for our small HOA, wiping out nearly half of our operating reserves. The rest of the HOA board, who had been increasingly fed up with Agnes's antics, turned on her like a pack of wolves. My meticulous documentation, presented to them in a calm, clear, and incontrovertible manner, left no room for doubt. Agnes had acted entirely outside of her authority, ignoring every warning, every bylaw, every rule. She was summarily removed from her position as board president, and from the board entirely. The board then moved to sue her personally to recoup a significant portion of the HOA's losses, citing gross negligence and abuse of power. Her reputation, both within Oak Haven and among the local community leaders she so desperately courted, was utterly destroyed. Her beloved Oak Haven, her personal dollhouse, became her undoing. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks. The demolition crew finished tearing down the monstrous archway last Thursday. The silence where it once stood is deafening, a palpable relief. The city, still quite peeved, is considering additional penalties for the traffic obstruction. Agnes is still living in Oak Haven, but she's a ghost. She doesn't attend any community functions, doesn't even make eye contact when seen. Her silver bob is no longer perfectly coiffed. Legal proceedings against her are moving forward, slowly but surely. I've heard she's had to mortgage her 3rd yacht to cover initial legal fees. Update 2. 2 months later. The lawsuit against Agnes has been settled, mostly out of court. She's agreed to pay a substantial sum, enough to replenish the HOA's reserves and cover the city's fines. Her house is now for sale, listed by a very discreet, out-of-town realtor. I've also heard whispers that the buyer is a notorious local developer who plans to petition the city to turn Oak Haven into high-density condos. Agnes, in her attempt to control Oak Haven, has inadvertently paved the way for its potential complete transformation, something she would have fought tooth and nail against before. Poetic, in a way. Update 3, 6 months on. Agnes Periwinkle is gone. Her house sold to the developer, who immediately began filing plans for rezoning. Oak Haven Estates is now facing a new kind of battle, a fight for its very existence against development. that's a story for another day. My mailbox, by the way, is back in its original, rightful spot. And I've heard that Agnes, in her new, much smaller apartment, received a notice from her new HOA. Her cat, Mittens, a fluffy Persian, is technically too large for the two-pet maximum and must be rehomed. Some rules, it seems, are universal, and some people never learn.